Hey guys, it's going to be our second lecture of spring training. This lecture is going to be the end of the Age of Realpolitik. This is the last part of this time period. We're looking at how art and literature has been affected based upon the events that happened in that time. What are the ideas and how have the movements of the events that have happened of the unifications, right, and within different countries and their reforms and the political changes. And people's lives are being affected by the end of the 19th century, and with new technologies, the surroundings are changing, and they're going to be expressing them through art and literature. Okay, so the two forms are going to be realism and impressionism. The first one we're going to go over is realism, and just as it's based upon realpolitik, it's really trying to be as realistic as possible, depicting life as it really was. And this is where realism is in contrast to what it came from, which is romanticism. And romanticism was very poetic, right? Very emotional, very personal, and they took a lot of the personal viewpoints in idealism, whereas realists are trying to forsake those things. They are now going to hold to a very strict and practical sense. They're going to be very objective and even scientific to some point. And they are letting the facts speak for themselves. So that's what they're holding to. They're going to observe and they're going to record. What are they going to be focusing on? What is their main topics? Well, they're going to look at the middle class, and they're going to have a kind of a negative connotation, some type of derogatory, either statements in writing, in some of the novels, or even in paintings as well. And they're also going to show the plight of the urban working classes and how their struggle in many different areas of how they are living in overcrowded cities, and through it, through their work, they're still struggling. Okay, for the most part, in literature, the working class has not really been highlighted, so this is kind of a new thing for the social class. Is largely a reaction to the failed revolutions of 1848, if we remember, because of romanticism, right, and idealism. They didn't have great planning, and the cooperation wasn't there, and so they failed to see real change happen. And so the success of idealism basically had dwindled and had died with romanticism, and from this people began to shift in the other way. And so we're going to see a lot of shifting back and forth. Okay, the taboo topics that a lot of realists are going to talk about that's going on in society is topics like sex, strikes, violence, alcoholism, factory life, and also living in the slums. Okay, so we're going to be going through the different countries and some of their artists and stuff. But France was kind of the center of the realist movement because romanticism didn't fully develop there. It existed, but it didn't take like a widespread movement. And so from that point, realism easily transitioned in. We have Honore de Balzac, who wrote The Human Comedy. And a lot of their works that they wrote about feature different types of topics, but all still within the same type of style, which is realism. In The Human Comedy, he writes about how the urban working class have been really struggling. They have seen violence. They are even becoming very amoral, right? They're losing their morals, and a lot of this social Darwinian type of ideology of struggling for wealth and power is going on between people in society. And then we have Gustave Flaubert. He wrote Madame Bovary. And this piece talks about the middle class and how they could be really shallow, really petty. They are very hypocritical and thinking that they are of a higher status, but they really live barely at their means. And then we have Emile Zola. Emile Zola. He was a realist in trying to explain that the working class life was kind of like you're an animal. Okay, you're just being worked and worked and worked and worked. And his novel Germinal talks about how young miners have this really hard life of manual labor, and he's kind of telling their story. Okay, some other writers we have. Mary Ann Evans. She had the pen name George Eliot, and so she would write under this name, and some of the things that she would write described how people were shaped by their social class, that whatever class you belong to, they would have their own specific and unique struggles and conflicts and moral choices that they go through. Under the name of George Eliot, she wrote Middlemarch, A Study of Provincial Life, and all these are English authors. Continuing on with Thomas Hardy, okay, Tess of the Ubervilles, talked about a woman that was being blamed and chastised in public for having premarital sex, and showing that there's a lot of social issues of their everyday lives, the conflicts that are going on between men and women, and how people portray even women at that time. And of course, we know Charles Dickens. Okay, we talked about him in class. And With Hard Times, a novel that really highlights a town that is being affected greatly by the Industrial Revolution and the people that live within it and how they are struggling through all of the changes of society. So Dickens wrote a lot of books on orphans, a lot of judges that are very intrusive, and basically the ruthless society that England has become, in showing that there needs to be some serious social reform. Okay, moving on to Russia and Scandinavia, you have Leo Tolstoy. He is the greatest Russian realist at this time. He's going to write War and Peace, and this was his masterpiece. It's a story about Russia during the Napoleonic Wars, and it's like really thick, like over 1,000 pages. What is he known for? He's known for having a fatalistic view of history, but at the same time, he imposes some of these values such as love and trust and everyday family life. And then you have Dostoevsky, who wrote Crime and Punishment. Crime and Punishment is really interesting. Between the two of them, they wanted to really explore what Russian culture was, what is traditional Russian culture, and write that out, and even show where did the sources of Russian nationalism stem from. So Crime and Punishment talks about how this one student leader that is part of a lot of these student leader movements, a lot of liberalism, idealism, and he eventually commits murder, and he says murder is permissible in pursuit of a higher purpose. If there's a reason for it, if you can counterbalance crime, then maybe murder is acceptable. Then you have Henrik Ibsen, who writes A Doll's House, and he is known as the father of modern drama. He wrote a lot of plays, and he talks about the conditions of morality and life of people, and he contrasted and had a lot of opposing views with a lot of the Victorian views. Okay, so morality is a huge topic that's going on in realism, because people are making moral choices all the time, and now they're highlighting how every single person, even on an ordinary level in their everyday life, are making these types of choices. Okay, so in art, 19th and 20th century artists are going to evolve, and they're going to change. We talked about how the scientist has changed over the centuries. The artist, the role of the artist is going to change as well. So starting from the Romantic period and on, we're going to see that artists are not going to depend upon patrons like the Renaissance and Baroque artists did before. Remember, we talked about how the church and a lot of wealthy nobles, they had the wealth to really support these types of works and these artists and stuff. But the newer artists in the 19th, 20th century, they're going to show and demonstrate their artistic freedom and sell their paintings, show off their skills to the public, and hoping that's how they could, gain a profession. So the commission is no longer from someone else saying, "Hey, paint a portrait of me," but now they are deciding what their art is going to be looking like, not what other people are telling them to paint. And so France is going to be kind of the center of the art world, and a lot of artists are going to send their works to the Paris Salon, and they're going to be judged by a lot of distinguished judges that see their pieces of art. And so they begin to capture the moments of ordinary people, and they're not trying to idealize anything, keep it very realistic as possible. The Paris Salon actually felt that it was very mundane. It had anything unique or special to it. And this is where photography is actually going to influence realism because of the new technology. In 1830, you have Louis Daguerre that develops the daguerreotype, which is an early form of photography. Throughout the 1800s, by 1890, we're going to see that the first Kodak camera is going to be affordable, and it's going to be purchasable by the general public, and then they can see that almost anyone can get their hands on a camera, which means it's capturing what's really happening. Okay, so here are some artists. Here you have Gustave Courbet. He has the stone breakers here. Okay, manual labor. Okay, rural worker. Then we have Francois Millet. He painted the gleaners, rural workers again. Okay, nothing idealized, simple, realistic. Honore Daumier, the third-class carriage. It shows a grandmother and a daughter and her infant traveling on the train, the railroad, and how the railroad, right, was developed during this time, and how it really gave people a new life towards transportation. For peasants, they can travel to cities now and leaving the countryside. Edgar Degas. This is called Laundry Girls Ironing. As you can see, they're basically domestic workers performing unskilled labor. Ironing's very simple. Okay. Edouard Manet, French realist, and also we're going to get into Impressionism, right? So he's also the transition as an Impressionist painter, bringing both kind of movements. He's kind of at the end of realism. I do not know how to pronounce this one. Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe. Why is this an important piece? Well, it really shocked audiences because it shows that two guys are in a park and they're just having a conversation, and then all of a sudden it just jumps out at you that you have a female that is nude at the same time in the very moment. Okay. All right. So realism. We don't need to go too deep with it, but we need to contrast this with Impressionism. Impressionism also began in France too, but because of the impact of photography, cameras can now accurately capture a subject, and artists are now moving away to try to capture what's really happening and saying, "Oh, that's what cameras are for. I'm not here to do photography. I'm here to do art." And so they're going to rebel against realism, and they're going to think about how physics, as it was on the rise at this time, there's a theory that images are basically that you see. If I see something, if I see like a red apple, right, that image is transmitted to my brain in small light particles, and then it's reconstructed into my brain. And so they're trying to kind of replicate this in how they paint. Painters are trying to capture the moment according to the overall feeling, the impression that they get from the scene that is before their eyes. What do they see? Okay, so a lot of times they are painting landscapes, and they're actually doing it very quickly because they're in the moment, and their brush strokes are going to be very visible. They're not trying to make it very clean, and they're going to use a lot of oil paints that are going to be in tubes now, and then so you can kind of imagine, the typical French painter that has the palette, and then they're using that and they're using it outdoors too, because they now have that technology. Okay, and so before, what used to be done in the studio can now be done mainly outdoors. Here are some examples. Monet. Here you have the most important and well-known Impressionist painter. This is called Impression Sunrise. This is where Impressionism really coined its term. This is kind of like a series of paintings. There's other ones too that are very much like this. Okay. Camille Pissarro. This is a really good example. If you look closely, it's not very clean in terms of like how everything is, but it's a lot of blotches. Impressionism is going to kind of lead to this new movement that's called Post-Impressionism, and Pissarro is known as the father of Impressionism. Okay, so Post-Impressionism, I know it's not the most creative name, but some characteristics of it is that they're trying to depict a world or worlds that are different from the actual physical, visible world in front of them that they see. They want to portray the unseen. They want to show what's going on a deeper level inside of a person. What's happening in their emotions, what's happening in their imagination, what can they kind of expound upon. It's a lot like Romanticism. So it's a lot of drifting back and forth in these artistic movements, just because people get bored, and then you kind of bring back new styles, like, oh, nice, I like that too, okay, and they get excited about that. So they're trying to express a lot of deep and complicated psychological views on what's happening, and also working with that a lot of like intense emotions. Okay, other sub-styles that are coming from it is called Cubism. Okay, so in Post-Impressionism, Cubism is going to be established as a style, and it's going to have a lot of zigzag lines and overlapping planes. We'll look at a couple examples of that, and you have the focus, once again, it's going to be more about how is the artist feeling, what is their mood at the time, not so much what are they painting. Okay, so they're fascinated really with the form of how they paint, opposed to whole light particles and stuff. So most famously known is Vincent van Gogh. Okay, so this one is called The Starry Night. He painted as he imagined it, not as what it is. Obviously, when you go outside and you look at this, that's not how a starry night should look like, but that's how he interpreted it. And so there was another one, Self-Portrait with a Bandaged Ear. I didn't put that one up, but Van Gogh is one of the main names you need to know for Impressionism. Okay, and then you have Henri Matisse, and he was part of a group of expressionist and impressionist painters that seemed very extreme at that time. A lot of critics called them les fauves, which means the wild beasts. And you can see from that, it attracted a lot of attention, and people did not accept this type of art at that time because it was so modern and getting more and more abstract. He focused really on just more about colors and form more than the actual subject. Okay, all right, and so we have Picasso. Picasso is the one who founded Cubism. This is in 1907. We'll get more into him as we get into the next part of the art movements. But Cubism concentrates on the complex geometry of the zigzagging. So we know Picasso, right? He has all those crazy, weird heads and shapes, and they're very much abstract, not formal, right? And he's also going to be part of Expressionism, which is the following artistic movement. Okay, so this one's called Les Mademoiselles d'Avignon. Don't really need to interpret it too much. Just know that his styling is changing with the time, and we'll get to what are the events happening that would lead to Expressionism. Okay, so that's it for this one. Number 2 done.